few breaths together and we'll enter into Yuki's talk.
Should have hooked this up to the speakers, but I don't know, maybe you'll be able to hear it. That's a chant that I get to listen to every single morning in the village. And well, hello, everybody. Thank you, Doug, for that intro. That was so beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah.
For people who have phones and want to follow the slides, you can do that by hooking up with Zoom.
Zoom, you sent that to me?
Yes. If anyone needs it. I don't think I'm on the email.
I was feeling.
Maybe for the people.
Okay. So Doug and I are essentially going to speak about sovereignty. And before I get into the work that I've done in Baké Kadior in Senegal, West Africa, I have to sort of double back and put things in a little bit of context, right? But before we start, I just kind of want to get an idea in the room. What does sovereignty mean to you? And folks on, if you're like on the Zoom, like what does, yeah, in the chat, or what does sovereignty mean to you? Pardon me?
Autodetermination.
Outer determination?
Yeah.
I'm gonna write this down. What do you?
AUTO. Right?
Yes.
AUTO.
Self-determination.
That's okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I've never heard of that. So interesting. Tell me. Self-determination. Any more additions to that?
Yeah, a nation that coexists with other nations through treaties.
Coexistence through fair treaties. Okay.
So I think
Freedom.
freedom to make choices without imposed upon.
Yeah, freedom to make choices. Anyone in the Zoom? I don't want to leave you out.
I can read it out. I'm sure you can see it. It says liberation at all dimensions and directions, expression of oneness without judgment.
Those are my.
Self-sustainability.
Hmm?
Self-sustainability.
Self-sustainability. Okay.
That's like the idea of agency.
Agency.
Ownership and direction.
Ownership. I'm not going to give you a definition, but I just want to see what comes up. And your wisdom, I'm going to try to interview that in what sovereignty means to certain revolutionaries like of the past. Yes.
A people. Meaning the people. People that see themselves.
Say that one more time. A people.
A people.
Yeah. Just a people.
Just a people.
A people exist. I like that. Okay. So just keeping in mind sovereignty, right? What you think about sovereignty and what we've heard about sovereignty. I'm working right now in Senegal, West Africa. And I'm going to, again, as I said, put things in context. So we're looking at Senegal, 1850 to 1950, right? The British Empire has abolished slavery. France, I think, abolishes slavery a bit later, right? So in this time period between 1850 and 1950, France is seizing land in West Africa, particularly Senegambia, right? Empires are being decimated. People are being still trafficked, right? People are being murdered. There's all, all the package that comes with colonial domination, right? So it's killing, it's rape, it's displacement, it's land theft. So this is 1850 to 1950. In this environment, a holy man rises up to create a revolution that's not based on arms and is not based on violence. Right? We hear about Gandhi and we hear about Martin Luther King, but his movement of peace and love has sustained itself for over 100 years. His movement still exists and exists really quietly in Senegal. It's actually quite remarkable. And so before I get into it, really, I want to invite you to suspend judgment for a moment and just, because all of us have our perspectives and that's okay, right? It's necessary. We need a multitude of perspectives to enjoy what this is, this life, right? So in this moment or for this next hour, I'm just going to invite you to just what you think about reality, what you know about reality, just sort of like pause it. And I invite you to shift a little bit, right? So we can understand what's going on in Senegal. Let's see. So this is coffee maker. Oh, is that reverb? So this is Abdul Aziz, Bai Abdul Aziz. He's one of the coffee makers in the village. This is the village of Mbake Kadior. He's with his son. You can tell he's not the same color, right? So that's very important to note that his child is of mixed breed. Oh, I don't like that word. That's such a horrible word. But pardon me, the farmer term, like mating humans. But you know, he has a wife that's Caucasian, right? And that's really important, right? As we continue the conversation. And every morning they chant this word, this phrase, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah. Who's heard of that phrase before? Yeah, yes, you've heard of it before. Anybody else? La ilaha illallah.
Dances of universal peace. I think we sing a song like that.
Yeah, La ilaha
There's
illallah.
no God but one God.
So there's levels to the meaning, right? So this is taken from Islam. This term, La ilaha illallah, is taken from Islam, right? And the Muslims in the Middle East and the Arab countries in South Asia will tell you that this means there is no God but Allah. There's no God but Allah, right? And that is like the first meaning, right? Things have multiple meanings. If we go down another layer, we go with what? But before we get to Nada's meaning, we'll go with there is nothing worthy of worship with God. You should not worship your cars. You should not worship your family. You should not worship your shoes. You should not worship your clothes. That nothing is worthy of value with God. And then we can go further, right? We can go deeper down into meaning. And La ilaha illallah would say, there's no one. What did you say? What was your? I like. There's no God but the one God. It's a singular God. There aren't multiple. It's just a singularity. And then we can even go deeper and say there is no reality but the one. Meaning that this, us, me, you, right? We are all like illusions. Our separateness is an illusion. Our form is an illusion. Meaning me being turned Black and Doug being white. This is an illusion. It's not real because it's going to disintegrate. It's something that was created and it's something that will pass away. So it's not inherently real. What is real is the consciousness that I carry, that Doug carries, that you carry, you carry, you carry, you carry. And it's the same consciousness, meaning when I speak to you, I'm speaking to myself. And when you speak to me, you're speaking to yourself. We are not separate beings. So there is no reality but the one, us. We are a singular reality. Nothing else exists. And what we're doing is playing around with forms. We're playing around with illusion. And sometimes we get caught in the illusion. We get caught in, she's a person of color, right? Or whatever labels, or she's trans, or she's a lesbian, or he is gay, or he is African. These are all separatist labels. La ilaha illallah in this village in Senegal, amongst a population means we are actually one being. It's plain. Right? And so they chant this every day to remind themselves that when they're speaking to another, They're really just speaking to each other. You're speaking to the same being. Right? And they try to remove the illusions from their consciousness always. Would you harm yourself? No. But you would harm another because you think that person is separate from you and therefore is not worthy of the rights you deserve. So if you remove that separation, what flows is peace and love. And these are the two foundations of their way. And it's the basis of their revolution, all right, and their resistance. They stand on peace and love and oneness. And it's, so that's why he can take a Caucasian wife because it doesn't matter, right? Here, it's like, oh my God. Yeah. So I went into what its meaning is, right? Every morning they chant this. Every morning they remind themselves of this message. There's nothing in existence but the one. And they chant it over the coffee they make, which you're about to take. They chant it over the coffee. Let's see. How are we for time?
Very soothing, very soothing.
And everybody's invited, by the way, to this village. There's no, again, it's all based on peace and love. And if you come in peace and love, they have a place for you to stay. You can observe the work that they're doing. It's a beautiful place. Okay, so this is another idea that I need to give to you so you can understand what the work that they're doing is the nature of this world. I spoke about it. It's not, this world is considered not inherently real. It's real, right? We're here, we're talking to each other, but it doesn't have an inherent existence, meaning this will pass away. But what is really real to the folks in Senegal is the unseen world that each and every single one of us is carrying within ourselves. And it's the same. That is reality, right? So there exists the seen world of forms, which is illusion, and an unseen world, which is true reality. And it's a singularity, right? And we have heard of this idea before in our work with Rudolf Steiner and with George Washington Carver. Can somebody on the Zoom read it?
Yeah, that'll be good, let them participate.
Yeah, just read the quote from Steiner and someone else read the quote from George Washington Carver, please. And you can unmute yourselves.
I'll read.
Yes, please.
Am I reading under? Okay, just the
Rudolf
paragraph.
Steiner. Yeah, the first paragraph from Rudolf Steiner.
Right. It says Western civilization would gradually bring destruction to itself and the earth if it did not begin to develop an objective understanding of the spiritual world and its interrelationship with the physical world. Rudolf Steiner.
Yes.
All my life, I had risen regularly at 4 a.m. to go into the woods and talk with God. That's where he reveals his secrets to me. When everybody else is asleep, I hear God best and learn my pain. George Washington Carver.
Yeah. So these two men are quite remarkable. Thank you so much for reading. That was beautiful. They're quite remarkable in that they're able to do things that other people couldn't do. Right? Rudolf Steiner is not a farmer, but he wrote a book on agriculture, which is like the holy grail for some of us, right? He single-handedly started a movement called the biodynamic, right, farming movement. Just genius. He is tapping into an unseen world. He's not accessing information from what he can see, feel, touch. He's accessing information from something that is more real than what we call reality. And because he's tapping into that, he can go so much further than us who just are fixed here. George Washington Carver, again, another phenomenal human being. And the US government was just like, how do you know so much about plants? It's just unreal. Like how are you from, a born slave? And he's like, I talk to God, I talk to the unseen world. You can't access this space. Again, but the Western world sort of denies the existence of this, right? But those that don't deny its existence perform practices to access that power. Right? The unseen is power in revolutionary action. And we have examples of this, people who tap into this unseen power, right, to cause changes in the seen world. And one example is Imam Makandal. Imam Makandal, again, from the Senegambia region. And he was a Muslim, but a Sufi Muslim, right? So his understanding of La ilaha illallah is at the deepest level, and that there's nothing but the one. And he taught in West Africa, and he noticed his students were disappearing one by one by one. And he was like, where are my students going? What's going on, right? This is trafficking. So he's like, I'm gonna go find my students. So he gets himself captured, right? And he goes and he's deposited in Haiti. Yeah. And his students are Bookman, Dutty Bookman, right here in the middle, right? And Toussaint Louverture. He leads, and he is the teacher of the folks who are powering the Maroon movement, which is like, the Maroons who escape and form communities in the mountains away from colonial eyes. And Bookman and High Priestess Fatiman, which is an interesting name, right? They're responsible, these three, for initiating the Haitian Revolution. Amongst people of color, they often say that it was Ifa, the Yoruba mystical system, that was powering it. But there's an alternative perspective that it was this mysticism that was coming from West Africa under Makandal that was also a force, right? They were able to tap into unseen worlds to defeat French colonial forces. Unheard of, impossible. There's no possibility that, right, the oppressed, the enslaved could defeat the armies, right, of the oppressed. This is impossible, but they did the impossible. And their reason was they were able to tap into spiritual power. Now, their revolution didn't last because when you study, there was some corruption, right? There was some corruption. And when we'll go into what corrupts a person. All right. Here is another two revolutionaries. They existed in the time of Steiner. They existed in the time of George Washington Carver. There's something very interesting happening, right, in this time. This holy man is Sheikh Amadou Bamba. And here another holy man, Sheikh Ibra Fall. Their movement is based on accessing the unseen to power a revolution or power resistance. Sheikh Amadou Bamba stated that we will not win against oppressive forces with violence. He was very clear. He was like, it's impossible, right? in the Haitian Revolution, there was force, but they weren't able to sustain that win because there was violence. Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba said, you cannot win with violence. He says, the way that we push back oppression is through an education system that's trifold. I can't really see these things, right? And it's based on service, or the word they use in Senegal, khidma, service. The revolution is won through service, right? And I tend to believe him because his movement is still functioning. I don't know if y'all can see that, right? So the three areas of education are service to God. Again, looking at going back to that meaning, it's actually service to the one. Singularity. And in turn, that means really I'm serving you, right? It means being a humanitarian. And then service to the self through character development. When we reflect on the Haitian Revolution and Toussaint Louverture, you know, there was some ego involved, meaning that he proclaimed himself leader for life, right? Now this kind of starts to smell a little bit like ego coming out. Right? There's this really important piece in the movement, which is, you know, as in hip hop, they say, check yourself before you wreck yourself. You have to check yourself, right? So it's like character development. Every single one of us, whether we consider ourselves on the side of light and good and righteousness or bad or evil, all of us have character defects. We cannot escape it. It's the nature of being a created form, right? This form. Pride, envy, greed, lust, all these qualities exist within us. And we need an education system that removes these from our consciousness, right? Why? So we can express that one better. So his system was like, you need to know how to serve humanity. You need to know how to serve God, which is that oneness. There are specific practices that they have, right? To like bring that one that's in each of us out more, right? There are practices, how to serve humanity. So that would be skills development, right? How to farm, to serve, feed humanity, how to make clothes, to clothe humanity, how to cook, to feed humanity. And then you do the work on yourself. And it's not easy to kill pride. You need to know how. There's systems in place. You know, there's like methodologies. How do you remove jealousy? There's a method for removing when you are envious of another, right? The formula is that you must love that person, right? If you find yourself envying something, the antidote is to love that person, right? And you have to fight yourself. Right? So the revolutionary does not fight the enemy external to him or her. The revolutionary fights the demons inside. Because if that pride, anger, jealousy comes out, it's going to create a system of oppression outside. So all the systems of oppression we see, according to Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, really are coming from something within the self that's manifesting outward. But if you can kill it, really, literally slay it inside you, you won't see it, right? Because all you'll be manifesting is peace and love and joy and happiness, right? Your jealousies won't be causing damage. Your greed, right? Because that's what we're seeing right now with corporations. It's greed out of control. If they had slaved their greed within themselves first, we wouldn't see external. Does that make sense? Right. So that is the education system, right, that they have in Senegal. I don't know, it's stuck, it's not moved.
Use the mouse pad
Okay,
and
maybe you can move. All of a sudden, I have no idea.
there you go. Is that the next slide?
Yeah. So that's the context, right? I had to give you all that information so you could understand what's happening. So the village, we do the education within what we call a school, but the school is also the village, right? Here in the West, we go off to school. In West Africa, you don't go off to school. The school is your home. You're always learning, right? And we call the village the Dara. Here is where you get your spiritual education, your character education, and your skills education. This is a winning formula, right? This is a winning formula. And the village or the Dara that I'm studying in is called Mbake Kadior. And it's headed, always these Daras are headed by a holy person, right? Someone who is tapping into the unseen world. And his name is Sirim Babakar Mbao, right? They're doing the same thing. They're spiritual education, skills education, character education. They're not so much focused on fighting the French colonial forces because they're still there. They didn't stop. It never, like we didn't get independence and they're like, oh yeah, all right, Africans. No, they're still there, right? But their way is not to fight the colonists. Their way is educate yourself, purify yourself, tap into this unseen world for power, and they cannot defeat you. Or they cannot defeat us in that way, right? This is Sirim Babakar Mbao and his wife. Again, form doesn't matter anymore, right? There is no difference. We are truly all one. When you believe that, it doesn't matter. There are no barriers to who you can be with. Which I think they're a great example of that. And I want to segue into the work that Doug is doing. And I've been speaking with Jane about this sort of, how can we bring this type of education here where it's really needed? And Doug's work with Bridges to Land, where there is skills education. And I think Jane and I have been talking, and I think Doug is feeling it. How could we intersect that with character education, character building education? Because you can have the skills, but if you don't have the right character, right, your skills may not benefit humanity. The spiritual education, that's tough, right? Because it's a personal thing. But with Doug's project, it's right to do something similar to what we're doing in Senegal, marrying these three ways. If we can raise humans that have righteousness within them, who have been able to control, right, what they call those demons, pride, envy, jealousy, greed, lust, and they are skilled and their focus is on helping humanity, we can raise up a very beautiful generation of young people. So I'm going to segue to you to talk about that project. Right?
Can you share?
Oh, gosh, back in Kadior. It's a long story, but I'll tell you, maybe after when we're drinking coffee.
I've already started drinking coffee. You want to come from this side of the room? No, you can stay there and then Just try to project your voices. Should we do a sound? Can everyone on the Zoom hear very well? Can you just unmute and tell us if you can hear well?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can, but we don't see the speaker.
Okay, I'll change that now. Let me
Yes.
just stop sharing.
Yes, you can hear well.
And then let me, which,
If you pin my name is Ainsley Zimmer.
I'll
If you
pin
hit
it.
those three buttons and you can.
There we go, there we go. Okay, now let me just, okay, can you just shift it a little bit?
Oh, wow.
And then maybe I'll, if I'm just gonna move this a little bit to the back. Oh.
Well, Jeff and I are gonna do our best to weave in Ruby's beautiful talk and introduction to that work. A little bit about what we're doing. I've been partaking in on this side of the ocean. So Ruby mentioned briefly Bridges to the Land. Bridges to the Land is a very new project started by a dear friend of ours, a mother in the South Bronx, who has been organizing a group called Justice for Families for the last many years. I'm not sure it's a national organization set up to really provide and support families of individuals who are incarcerated with basic resources that the state does not offer. How to visit your loved one when they're inside, how do you actually physically get to the prisons, you know, what are you able to bring, where can you stay, all of the kind of like basic logistical things, as well as a lot of just emotional and support as well. But you know, there are a lot of empty spaces that the state does not fill in that make it really, really hard for individuals to stay connected. And most, you know, if we've studied the prison industrial complex, we can understand that it's a tool and a tactic to keep communities and families separated. So just transitioning into that, our friend Jeanette Bokamega, who started this organization, has been thinking about how to further and more deeply support individuals and their families. And she and our friend Jane had an idea of integrating a land-based immersion program alongside a healing and therapeutic kind of project for families and individuals who are currently and formerly incarcerated. So Bridges to the Land is this beginning project that is working with young people who have been formerly incarcerated or involved in some way, so somehow impacted by the system, to make provide an opportunity and opening for them and their families to have access to nature, to farms, to growing your own food, to your own self-determination and eventual sovereignty is the kind of broad, long-term goal, I would say, if we had one, is really recognizing kind of the foundations of the prison industrial complex, its history in land theft and enclosure, and all of these things that kind of have been situated to remove people from their own capacity to provide for themselves and their communities. And that land is and has always been central to liberation, to spiritual evolution, and ultimately, I think, to kind of the transition away from a prison economy and prison complex and all of the complexes of the colonial oppressive system. To get free from those things really requires our connection to where we all come from, and that's land. I am a guest here. I am, you know, of European descent. recognizing that I am currently, occupying and part of an ongoing settler project of occupying Turtle Island. So there's a complexity within how I can talk about sovereignty and self-determination on land, while also recognizing that I am a, uninvited guest here. So there's many, complexities within that, and then also the project. But I think what we've started with, this has been our first year working with 5 young people, 5 young men from the South Bronx in Brooklyn, who have come up to the Adirondack Mountains, Adirondack Park. And for the last month, we've been up there all together, just kind of immersing into rural agrarian life. The idea is that these young people are we've been working on farms, and the idea is that if they want to, they can start to and continue working on these farms, organic farms, mostly regenerative agriculture, for the rest of the summer. So we have a job, a paying job, we have housing. Myself, Jane, Jeff, a few other colleagues are there for like emotional support and physical support, because something that often happens when people move to a very new place, especially from an urban setting to a rural setting, there's a lot of harm that can happen, not just physical harm, but also just the harm of being in a very new place around really different people without the resources that you're used to. And oftentimes that leads to, people that, Ruby and I know that go to a farm and get started, and then it just gets really, really hard. You don't have the support structures and the people there that hold you and to love you and to keep you motivated and spiritually involved in that work. So recognizing some of those blind spots or things that kind of come up in the way, we're trying to institute some foundational support systems for people who do decide and choose to come up to the North Country to work on farms for the long term. That we are building, a support system of relationships that they can always have, and so it feels a little bit safer that they have people to call if something comes up, or they have issues on the farm, if they have issues accessing housing or anything like that, that they have friends right there and nearby to help them through that. And then with the jobs and the working on the farms kind of being a shorter term thing, but in the longer term, really providing a place and a space and education and resources for people to start to transition back to living on the land and with the land in self-determined ways. And always doing this in relationship to understanding that we're amidst and part of ongoing settlement in the colonial project. So, how do we integrate these different ways of combating kind of the same oppressive system that is creating prisons, that is continuing to steal land and build pipelines and do all of these things to indigenous territories. So recognizing, as Ruby had said, the oneness of it all, and that we are all one, and that what we're trying to do is create a space for us to remember that and really live into that oneness, and doing that on and with land, in relationship to land and to the water and to the mountains, that we can all call home. So, I'm gonna just shift to Jeff and ask Jeff. Jeff is my comrade and thought partner, has been really grounding like the work on the land that we've been doing within kind of a context of just history and like the systems that we're working within, the societal systems that we're working within. So I don't know if there's anything, Jeff, that you'd like to bring in and resonate from Ruby's talk.
Thanks, Doug. And thank you, Ruby, for bringing us and welcoming us. And thank you, Nada, and WESPAC and the community for welcoming us collectively to this space. I'm really very meditative at this point because having heard everything Ruby has been talking about, reflecting on the experience that that brings me here, while we are serving the larger goal of finding truth in ourselves and connecting that truth to the universe. The element of truth that serves, at least that I serve in this process, that I find so useful, because I met Ruby. I'm an organizer. First of all, I should probably more appropriately introduce myself. My name is Jeff Monroe. I live in Mount Vernon, the colonial place we call Mount Vernon, New York, in this colonized place we call the United States. I come as a displaced African, like so many of us, a displaced person from a people who were born in a place we call the Caribbean, and I was socialized in a colonized place called Canada, politicized in this US imperial system, and I've come into myself, or in some part of myself, as a person who's trying to get back to myself. I'm an organizer in that sense. I'm a former member of the imperial military. I'm a parent. I'm a son of working class parents. I'm a brother and a comrade and a co-worker. And in this work that we're doing, that I come to as an organizer, I'm learning how to be a farmer, which is brand spanking new to me. I've come up professionally for 20 years as an audio video technician. I know more about this microphone than I do about a plant. And yet the plant is so much more important to my and our world. And it's such a breath of fresh air at 52 to finally come to the more important aspect of my being and our being. And that's why I'm so grateful to be here. But I don't want to end up rambling, but the process that Ruby is bringing us into, considering sovereignty, ownership of self, and ownership of your relationship to the God that brought us here, that still rules regardless of what we think, under whatever system we think this is or call it. I serve this Bridge to Land experience with my brother Doug and Sister Jeanette and Sister Jane. And part of my task in that process was to bring young men, mostly Africans or African descended. If they speak Spanish, they're still African descended. And they too are young men displaced, even more so in a system that has taken their sovereignty, displaced their being, and thrown them in some places into these cages and concentration camps we call prisons. And our task is to bring them back to themselves. They've been caught up in this system that creates hustlers out of all of us, really, and predators. And of course, because they're children or have been children in the system, they learn to prey on themselves and to those who love them and who they love. So they've been fortunate enough to get to a place where they can now come to realization that they do have a self to get back to. And part of my task and responsibility is to help them see that there is a self to get back to, that regardless of wherever you've been or been taken to, whatever's been ripped from you or from under you, your humanity is still there. And if you breathe, you can still fetch it. The African principle of Sankofa is in its expression. It's an English expression. It's known as to go back, or to go forward, go back and fetch it. And it's an Africanism to always live in the present, but to know your past so that you can go forward from the present. And it's every civilized people know this. Unfortunately, we don't, because that civilization has been ripped from so many of us. And those of us who even consider ourselves African, if we do, or whatever that word is, that should be the people that come from the place we call Africa. These identities are a struggle to maintain, number one, well, to find, number one, to maintain, number two, and to grow and to nourish. And that's, as an adult, trying to nurture a young man, it's a burden, but it's a blessing. And it's something that I am blessed to find on a path that I've met Ruby and Doug on, and that I've met some of you on. You know, I've been blessed to meet you all in ways that you know, I've never experienced and I've never expected and never asked for. And that's why it's really such a blessing, because many of our best blessings don't come because you ask for them. But if you're fortunate, you get them and you acknowledge them. So that's why I want to acknowledge Ruby for this and her task to bring us back to ourselves in some way through the spiritual path that she's taken. You know, she's introduced us to this process of imbibing and the spiritual practice of using the coffee. She'll explain more about that. But I think more symbolically is this connection of bringing Africa back to us and bringing us back to Africa. Regardless of where you've been born on this planet, your people are African. And that's an anthropological reality. What words we use, I'm not going to debate. In fact, I'm not qualified to debate it. I've just been fortunate to learn some of the language from some of our greatest teachers, some of whom are ancestors. But the task is to grow as a man with other men and women and sisters, brothers on this world, to return back to this humanity that Africa taught us so many scores of millennia ago, in a way that it's gonna hurt, it's gonna shock, but it's shock that brought us here. It was a shock treatment that got us here. So it's a shock treatment that you have to go back through, you know. But I don't know how much more to appropriately say beyond that. You know, this process of nurturing these young men, bringing them into sovereignty of land means bringing them into sovereignty of self. And this is the one thing I did tell them in a couple orientation meetings we had. You know, I explained to them that my struggle to return to the land, you know, as a push button technician professional, you know, is as alien as, you know, taking a fish and teaching it to climb a tree, you know. But there are fish that breathe air, right? It's not impossible. It's not some alien, completely impossible thing. Whether that's meant to be or not is not my point. The fact is we're meant to know adaptability because survivability is what is the human thing to do. Not just to get over or to get by, but to thrive and to grow into your humanity. And I hope to continue on the path. I hope to continue in the way that Ruby has introduced us to more people, to build this bridge, to build more bridges, you know, back to Africa, and to welcome people, not just to Africa, but to the humanity of Africans within them and within the spaces we occupy, whether we occupy this by force or by choice. Frankly, few of us do it by choice, but you know, it's a blessing to be here, and I hope that we can continue to do that work, because that's really what it is. But it's a good work. You know, it's a blessing to be able to do this work. So thank you, Ruby. Much love, and to your family and the brothers and sisters in Senegal or wherever in the continent, you know, that you bring us, you know, spiritually or physically. You know, thank you. So I don't know how helpful that's been, but.
Coffee, yo, coffee. Yeah, why we're all here. Why we're all here.
Are there questions? I don't know if anybody has.
You can unmute on Zoom as well.
I have a question. So the young people, so primarily young men from South Bronx and Brooklyn, right? When are they relocated to these areas where they start doing farming and stuff like that? They relocate to live there permanently or temporarily while they're doing farming?
So the question was the young people that are part of the program, if they're relocating to the area up north, to the North Country, permanently or temporarily.
Yes.
It's their choice. We had a 2-week immersion in June where everybody came up and got a feel for the place. We met, we worked on a few different farms so that they got a sense of different operations, what felt good to them, what didn't. We met possible employers for them. We've been finding housing, figuring out transportation in the chance that any of them want to come back up. So the idea, it's the 2-week immersion was very much a beginning and opportunity for people to have an experience to say if they would like to come up or not and try out a longer term. So if they come up, they'll be up for the rest of the farming season, the possibility of staying up there for a lot longer. So we're still figuring it out as we go. So it really depends on what everybody wants.
My last question. Yeah. Where you said, what is it called? Where it is?
So the program has been up in the Adirondacks. The Adirondack Park, which is Haudenosaunee territory. It is about, where we are in Essex County. It's right on the lake, the west side of Lake Champlain. It's about a 4-hour drive from here. So 4.5 hours from New York City. And yeah, straight up 87.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's so how this kind of originated was the founders of Bridges, the first thought kind of visionaries of Bridges to the Land. Like they had family members who were incarcerated upstate. And so up in the Adirondacks there are a lot of prisons up in the North Country. Again, a strategic thing, about as far away as you can get from where a majority of people who are incarcerated in New York State come from New York City. And the Adirondacks are about as far as you can get from New York City in New York State. So the trip to get up there is like a daunting trip for family members who are wanting to go see their loved one. It's a 10-hour bus ride, I think, to some of these places, some of these facilities. And if you're coming from New York City, if you don't have your own car, you take public transportation. There's one bus, it's a pretty cruddy bus. If something happens to the bus, it's a very rural place. It can be very kind of scary if you're not from there. You don't know like where to stay if something happens, where to get food, where to sleep. So the whole thing is just a mess. So understanding that like there are so many blockages and walls up to families staying connected, right? Like not only is it the distance, but it's all of the messiness of how do you actually go to see your loved one who's locked up. They make it very, very hard for someone to do that. And so, so having, people up there that are around that, we're figuring out how to make it easier for people to be able to stay connected to their loved ones. And also, like we're saying, in a long-term way, for people to be up there. The land is amazing. It's some of the most majestic water, rivers, mountains, farmland, like all of it, it's a very, very special place. And it's also for folks who know of John Brown, abolitionist, it's where he had he passed away, he died up there right after this initiative to start a community called Timbuktu for freed enslaved people up there. That was a place for people who are coming out of slavery to be on land and to have land. And so like there's a history of abolition, of liberation, land-based liberation on this place, as well as centuries and centuries of caretaking and shunning of this place that continue to this day. So anyway, just a little bit more of that.
You have local farmers come on board.
The farming community up there, I would say because of its rurality and because it's quite remote and it's not easy living. The farmers who are up there are very connected to each other. And back to Ruby's kind of, talking about this principle of oneness and, communal, collective togetherness, that like people take care of each other because they need to. Everybody, you really see it in areas, in rural places, that one person's wellness and thriving is really dependent on the communities, on everybody's. So the farmers take care of each other, and there is a lot of food up there. A lot, and Essex Farm is one of the places they ship down a van full of food every week to the South Bronx for free. So there's avenues already set up for sharing and reciprocity.
Who funds the organization?
It's currently funded donation. Justice for Families is I believe, a nonprofit that is able to apply for grants and such. So right now that's what it's based on. But we're hoping to create some community guided quote unquote for-profit, just because of the system that we are trying to survive through right now, to be able to fund ourselves.
Right.
So we're working on that.
Is Jalal involved?
Jalal is always involved. He's always with us, not directly, but yet.
There's one, if I could. One aspect of this I want to expand on, because I mean the generosity of Jane Hawk and the community in Keene is something that I mean, it's a whole other discussion socially and politically in the United States to talk about what rural, quote unquote, white folks have to really owe, but have to offer those of us that still seek the sovereignty of land and the ownership, not in a capital ownership of space, but belonging of space. It's something that I reflect on, and reflected on heavily when I went up there to visit, because before talking to these young men, I need my own kind of experience up there to see physically beyond the land for at least a short space of time. I was able to go up there, and this all actually comes around to supporting Ruby, actually, by the way, because it's something that I consider the most important thing we could be doing in this era. This space is so rural that, being in the hills, and I have relatives in Canada. I drive up, before COVID, used to drive up there fairly annually maybe, to visit them, and I would use 87 and maybe turn left at Albany, but this had me going another 2 hours beyond Albany in a direction I've never gone before, closer to Montreal, actually, in Canada than anywhere else in Canada, to be geographically kind of descriptive. But it's so far up in the hills and new for me. It was kind of surreal. Once you leave the highway, I was up there. It was a pretty hot, clear sky day. almost as soon as I got off the highway, and I documented part of it. I was busy taking pictures while I was driving. I know those tell anybody, but I was taking a video, and I can prove this because I got off the highway, and within 2 minutes, I was driving on a back road up a river, and it started raining, like a torrential downpour in the middle of what you could not see 2 minutes before. There were no gray skies, there were no thunderheads, clouds, and I wrote it off in my kind of, pseudo-scientific understanding as maybe climatic change, pressure, temperature, etc., trees, vegetation versus the highway that I was on. But the fact is the land is so much more present. And there's less disturbance there. I mean, there are roads, but the disturbance of the roads are less pervasive, right? The trees grow almost literally onto the shoulder of the road. The road itself follows the banks of a river that's probably been there for 20,000 years. And this is the land that our Native brothers and sisters understood and used and stewarded. And driving, in that rain, I understood more clearly at the moment, this is why the trauma of enslavement and colonialism will not go away anytime soon, because you get used to this. Your DNA is used to that after a certain amount of time. And even if you take a people from there, it doesn't go away. Even now, it's only been a couple hundred years since these people have been either decimated or displaced. And the people who are there now, who've only been there for a couple hundred years, and their DNA is really more accustomed to maybe Europe or Germany or England or something, or even Africa, because many of these young men are young men of African origin that are stuck in these cages up in the hills. And while the hills are healthy and healthier space, they're stuck in the concrete walls and these concentration camps. But the sovereignty that they could acquire coming back to the space, the natural land, the relationship they could use to bond and get back to themselves is something that colonizers owe the rest of us at this point. And it's a language that is a lot of it is couched in reparations and other political language nowadays. It sounds more capitalist and monetary or physical and tangential, but it's really very spiritual. It's really deeply emotional and psychological in ways that I think the best psychologists will not find words for many generations. And of course, that's speaking as a layman. I'm sure somebody with a PhD is going to walk in the door and tell us exactly how to couch a language, right? But I think in real human terms, this sovereignty, this return is what I think our best allies, like John Brown, and our contemporaries like John Brown, who might be Doug, or somebody else who's really earnestly, or Jane Hawk, who's earnestly trying to come out of whiteness, which is a construct, an unfortunate passage of somebody's imagination, to come back to that sense of humanity, right? And to come back into humanity and bring the rest of us, not to where they are, but so that they bring the walls down so the rest of us can follow the humanity back to ourselves, is what I think Ruby's trying to do here. Not on her own, but she's facilitating it. And it's something we should honor. It's something we should follow, because if we don't do this, I really don't know what's going to happen. I'm not trying to be alarmist. And at this point, I cannot be hyperbolic. You can't be too extreme nowadays to talk about what could possibly happen if humanity does not return to itself. The examples, just log on to any newspaper right now, and even though they're lying through half of what they're telling you, they can't help but explain between the lines that everything is falling apart. An African writer, Chinua Achebe, wrote a book called Things Fall Apart, but it explained in human terms, in a lot of metaphorical ways, but in very understandable political ways too, how humanity loses itself. So much so that, it's maybe a spoiler alert, but if you haven't read Things Fall Apart, there's a suicide at the end. And one of the most humane people in the book takes his own life rather than be taken and have his humanity taken. because while in that book, Colonization Wins, he refuses to lose his humanity. And that's what's at stake. And I think, when I want to thank Doug, but not in any congratulatory way. We a lot of us see John Brown and white allies, as we call them, as heroes. And this is obviously, it is courageous work, as courageous as an African to resist colonialism. But, we have to remember, this is what people are supposed to do. A person's not a hero for doing what they're supposed to do. I know American culture says differently, but Ruby's doing heroic work, but she's not a hero. She's doing what she's supposed to do. And if we honor that in her, we honor ourselves. And in whatever way we can support this bridge, buying the coffee, honoring the work that we do transatlantic, or even across the Pacific. I mean, colonization is everywhere. But I guess it's the one thing I want to remind us, because it's the one thing I can't forget. I can't stop thinking about as we talk about this, because that's the hard part of dealing with these young men that are incarcerated. A lot of them lose their humanity, and it's part of the reason this war on African people succeeds in bringing people into cages. You got to first be able to take the humanity from them to make an excuse or plausible kind of fallacy that they deserve to be jailed, right? Where the biggest criminals are wearing suits and running governments. But, I guess I just wanted to make that point, that I want to be grateful first for the work that Ruby and Doug are doing. And that, I just want to continue to thank and welcome anyone who will join us in that work.
I mean, without the spiritual grounding, we are so lost, and we're headed for a horrible disaster. So how can we join and follow the spiritual learnings that we need?
Come to Mbake Kadior. There is an invitation for everyone to come to Senegal. Serene Baba Kambo said, come, just come. Don't worry, just get yourself there. There's housing for you, 3 meals, the breakfast and the dinners sometimes. The lunch is amazing every time, come over there and just be with the people there, just be with them. I recently got married. I wanted to tell you guys in a different way, but surprise. All right, surprise. Yeah, right. Surprise, I'm married. I got married, and my husband runs a school. It's called the Sufi School, and it teaches people a lot of the science, right? How to access spiritual power, how to access the unseen world. This is very well documented formulations, right, in textbooks, right? And a lot of it is handed down from what they call master or to apprentice, right? Over centuries now. And it's this master apprentice relationship does not exist only in Islam. It exists actually in all the major religions, right? Even in Buddhism, there are formulations for accessing the unseen. It's just not spoken about publicly, but these formulations do exist. So tuning into some of the courses, what does character education look like? It's really tough work. Like, I've struggled with anger for like a long time since I was very young. It's like something that will possess me, and I've had to, with his help, chip away at the source of it, chip away at it, and use certain formulations. And I like a month ago, I had a breakthrough. It's possible to reformulate yourself. And so he has a school that focuses on that, and I can share information. about that. But I want to give you some information about this coffee. All right, so there's a lot of work to do and you need power. You need energy, right? And that's another big thing we need to discuss, like health, if we're not healthy, we can't do this. So this coffee is known as a healing coffee, and it was formulated by Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, right? A holy man who has done things that are unbelievable, right? It puts Carver and Steiner to shame. That is, forgive me for saying that, you know what I mean? As a farmer, like, oh, forgive me. But what Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba has done, he was able to build not just one village, but multiple villages and a city within French colonial Africa, like with French domination. I mean, they were kingdom after kingdom after kingdom after kingdom they just decimated, land grabs. He was like, I have the power to create a village and you won't touch it. I'm going to create a city and you cannot cross its boundaries. And that city still stands. Those villages still exist. 100 years later, it's remarkable what he was able to do in the face of colonial oppression. It's really remarkable.
People all have to hold on to that teaching though to maintain.
Yes, yes.
So obviously-
Spaces that don't hold on to the teachings, you see them sort of deteriorate. Unless, so there are his family, right? His family, his sons, his grandchildren sort of keep everything going, right? They are the backbone or the cornerstone to keep the teachings alive. Wherever the teachings, right? Whenever they stop focusing on character education, skills education, and spiritual education, they fall off, right? So there's been influence from Arab Islam, where, forgive me, but Arab supremacy will focus mostly on the spiritual education and only on the surface, right? And wherever they hold on to Arab Islam, you start to see a degradation. Wherever you see them focusing on the inner meaning of things, deepest meaning of terms, and they focus on skills development and character development, you see a flourish like in Mbake Kadior and them. There are a few villages that still hold on to the true teachings and they're flourishing. And one of the products, and it's all about sovereignty, right? And they're like, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba's like, you've got to be able to sustain yourself, farm, grow something, produce a product. And one of that is Cafe Tuba. So this is a formulation, a specific formulation created by Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, a holy man, right? And he said that, I'm going to put a secret in this. Right? We're going to get coffee and we're going to put an indigenous spice called jar, right? And at a certain percentage into this coffee, whoever drinks this coffee with the intention of doing humanitarian work, you will be empowered. You will have the strength to do it, right? And, some German scientists were like, yeah, okay, let's test this. And it does heal, right? It's fights out, I think, Alzheimer's, type 2 diabetes, folks with pressure issues. There's a list that I can send to you now to send out, right? So it is actually proven to be a healing coffee, particularly for the nervous system. But then there's a secret in there. We don't know what the secret is. He didn't tell us what the secret is, but he said there's a secret in here. If you drink this coffee, you will be empowered to do the work that you need to do. And I don't drink coffee. I do not like coffee. I can't stand coffee, but I do drink this one, right? I take a couple of sips and I'm like, what?
So I suppose, considering its powerfulness, I suppose there is no decaffeinated.
No, there is not a decaffeinated version. No, morning. This is a morning coffee, but yeah, this is a definite morning coffee. Not. Do not drink it. Just sip it.
Sip it.
Just sip it.
Wow, must be sweet.
But it's tasty and it does not need any sugar. at least
Yeah.
for me. But there is sugar.
Yeah. They drink it dark and sweet in Senegal, dark and sweet. But this, I had to drive here and I don't like driving and I'm always falling asleep. I drank half a cup of this. From Virginia to New York, nothing, no problem.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
no issue.
Came this morning from Virginia?
No. This was like, when did I come here? It was Saturday. Because I had to make it to do the garden work. We had a garden day on Sunday. And so I said, okay, I have the intention to do this humanitarian work. Get me to New York. And so I
Does the
incredible.
drinking of coffee predate colonization? Like I'm thinking of
Yes.
sugar and how sugar was raised, sugar was grown under. So yes, okay. So can you explain a little?
that I can't tell you much about because again, I don't really, Coffee and I are not like best friends. I've never really liked it, except for now, which is unusual. But they have the real, real bifalls, the real, folks that follow Sheikh Abdul Baba, they'll drink it dark.
I think the origin of coffee is from Ethiopia.
From
Yes.
where?
Ethiopia,
Ethiopia.
I believe,
Oh,
and then it
Yes.
spread.
Yeah, but we were drinking it before, for sure.
How can people support the project? You mentioned supporting the Free People's Market. Can you say something about Free People's Market?
People's Market. It's a Free People's Market is all our projects, right? It really is. Who's heard of the Free People's Market? All right, this is our baby. This is our baby. Doug's baby as well. It's all of ours.
it's Westchester based?
It is Mount Vernon based. The foundation is just to be free, be free of oppression. It's to feed people good food in Mount Vernon because it's scarce there. It's to grow our own food, to have a space where we can gather, we can commune with each other, share ideas. We can garden there. We can exchange ideas, quote unquote, through education there. But it's something that's morphing in that we are spearheading it, but it's something that we want the people to direct. We want as many organizations involved, as many people involved, community members involved to help us grow it, right? We do not want to have this sort of hierarchical top-down type of organization, The only thing that, my presence, I'm there to keep us righteous, keep us free, right? That we never violate the principles that we say that we believe in. So if ever we're straying left or right from our principles, my role is to, get us back to that straight path. That's my role, really. Jeff really runs the market. Yeah, he runs the market. He's there's so much love in that market. It's unbelievable. People come, get fresh produce, like stuff that from Rocksteady Farms is so incredible. And folks are so appreciative of it. And they love us so much. When Miss Beverly came to City Hall with me to, and she's a market goer, she came to City Hall with me like 2 days ago because we want to possess that land. That's the right word. We want the land.
Decolonize.
Is that the word? Decolonize it? Yeah. So that's the Free People's Market. Just we want to grow food, we want to grow community, and we just want a free space.
So they have delivery to the community for free once a week?
Once a week, every
Once a week,
Tuesday.
where they distribute high quality fresh produce.
It is our project. I know people don't feel ownership yet, but I'm hoping in time, that this is our project. And
So we would like contributions for the future.
Yeah, we're always looking for contributions. We have folks in the community who have stepped up to, like, since I'm in Africa, so we're like one person down. And folks in the community have stepped up to like run the market. Like, it's amazing. You know, you have to scraggle for volunteers.
Wow.
Folks, we have too many volunteers at this point, you know, and folks really want to grow. We have Mr. Jonathan is growing in buckets on the property. Like, folks are fired up. They want us to do, you know, they want to go. And we need some money. We need some money. Tell your friends. So Amy from Our New Way Gardens has a not-for-profit. Again, we want to be free. That's why we call it the Free People's Market. We do not want to interact with the government as much as possible. We do not want to interact with banks. We do not want to interact with, like, you know, we don't want to become a corporation. We have friends who have corporations. They can interact with, you know, the government and banks. So Amy is willing to receive funds on our behalf and be our accountant, our fiscal sponsor. And we asked for $100 for a donation of $100. You can donate any amount you want. No amount is too little. For $100, you get a bag of coffee. As a gift, as a thank you gift, you get a bag of coffee. Donation. The money will go towards offering our volunteers who are unemployed some type of stipend. It will go into cleaning the lot fully. It's kind of like, we did a big cleanup on Sunday. It's looking so good right now. Just to get us over that hump so we can start growing there, even though we're growing in containers. I know towards that, towards supporting our volunteers and helping to grow the garden. And some little infrastructural things for the market, like bags, paper, gloves.
Should people write a check or go to the website and make an online contribution?
Amy gave me her little square thing.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or you can email Amy and say, hey, I want to donate. Email Amy, say I want to donate. She'll set you all up.
WESPAC has a modest food justice fund, so we'll buy 3 bags. We'll make a contribution of $300, and we're happy to have three bags. Yeah.
This is the dream, like all the work that we do. Amy, then are off.
Somebody's asking if you could please speak in the microphone. They're having trouble hearing you.
So sorry, I apologize.
I might have to email.
You know, the one thing.
Donation of $100, you get a free.
Yeah, I tried to increase the volume. I don't know. I'm doing something wrong, Jeff, with the microphone, with the sound system. The email for Amy?
Reiterate, so this is the culmination of those 3 branches of education, right? There's a spiritual education. There are actual like chants that the coffee master does when making the coffee, right? La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, la, that remembrance that we are all one, right? That energy is imbued in here. This is also like a reflection of the skills development. Making coffee, making cappuccino is a skill, right? It's all natural, right? From bean, they roast it by hand, they pound it by hand, they pound the jar and they mix it in. So it's an actual skill. So there are like skilled coffee makers in the village, right? And it's a character education, right? To do that work, you need good character. good character to do this, to make cafe do that. There's a level of good character that you have to have. So all of that sort of like is reflected in this coffee too, but it's made in the village of them. The Sri Bogaka, the spiritual leader overseas. And every bag of coffee that is sold also benefits the village as well.
Wonderful.
Are you asking for Amy's email?
It's ournewwaygarden@gmail. So I'll put that in the chat.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Oh, by the way, we have Colby here from Greenberg, and she started a farmer's market, but she needs farmers she needs produce in Greenberg.
In the Greenberg Town Hall, yeah.
Yes.
On Thursday.
So if you have ideas on how Colby really needs vegetable produce people at the,
Sell produce at all?
The plan is to develop a revenue generating enterprise that will employ people that run the market. We want, first of all, we want to replace the nutrition desert that is Lower West. We need a farmer's market in the traditional sense that local nutritious food can be acquired affordably. But we want to also do it in a way that employs people and is self-sustaining so long as we have this economy and capitalism such as it is. We want to be able to sell affordable, good food, employ people living wages to do it and not rip off people lying, right? So that's, it's a tricky formula, but I just think it's doable and it's frankly, we have no choice right now.
Right.
So,
At this point, the vegetables can only be given away. They
Right.
can't be sold at any form.
We acquired them from farms that already have their own CSA clientele. I think now could probably.
so they donate the produce to the Free People's Market, the farms in the area, and then Jeff and Ruby basically distribute them to the community. So I think Colby's really looking for produce vendors to come and sell
Where?
right here, right down the street.
Yeah, the town hall.
Right at the town hall. Right, so we were looking like because I was thinking along the lines of those vegetables that were in Mount Vernon could be sold at that market. And then those funds can go back into the organization. Whatever is sold, right? If we sold a lettuce head for $3, that $3 goes, obviously after someone, whoever's selling in the market that they get paid for working, or if they're volunteering, and that money would go back to the organization. Yeah, I would definitely want to look into that, and because of what the organization represents, we will want to look at how we can, work with the fees that are associated with the market, because it's the work that is being done. We don't want to say, oh, it's charge of so much of what it would be. Because you all are doing the work that you're doing, it's not necessarily for profit, right? It's actually to go into doing the work, and I think it's